Well, the lighting is terrible and my position is terrible, but as you can see, my cat is in my lap, so I can't get up to turn the lights off and I can't move my chair. Ben Shapiro and Sam Harris had a talk on Barry Weiss's YouTube channel, basically about, it's supposed to be about like Trump or Kamala, but the entire thing is about Donald Trump. The only thing I really want to focus on is the utter hypocrisy of Ben, and to demonstrate that he is the king of the false equivalency with the stupid stuff he says. First up, here's Ben justifying how and why he will support Donald Trump, despite in the past being like a never Trumper.
The calculation for me is very simple.
Oh, and I do have this sped up a little bit because Sam speaks way too slow. No, Ben speaks too fast, but we're just going to have to live with that.
Simple. Donald Trump was a better president than Kamala Harris would be, with all of Donald Trump's flaws, with all of his excesses, and because we do have a very robust and durable constitutional system almost built to hem in his flaws and excesses. What that means is that I get a lot of good policy that I wouldn't get with Kamala Harris. I do get a stronger American presence on the world scene with regard to America's allies. I get a better economy. And I think it would serve as a corrective to a Democratic Party that seems to have spun out into a world of damaging wokeness, because the Democratic Party is either going to force itself further into this sort of left-wing corner, or they're going to have to moderate and deal with the reality, which is if they lose to Donald Trump twice in 3 election cycles, there's something deeply wrong that cannot simply be corrected by swiveling further to the left. One of the big questions that I have for folks who sort of see Donald Trump as this Hitlerian, Mussolini-esque figure is, if that's true, then why didn't we see that in term 1? He tried to do many things. Those things were generally unsuccessful in terms of his excesses.
So we're not hearing every single point that he made because I am trying to keep the revenue for this video for myself and not have it go to Barry Weiss. But the hypocrisy I'm seeing here is he's basically saying the guardrails worked for Trump and then implying that they won't work for Kamala Harris. Apparently, Kamala Harris can use executive action to usher in wokeness and communism and whatever, even if she wins the election, which that's not very clear. The House is going to stay Republican, and the Senate is almost certainly going to go Republican as well. There's so many things we pretend that the president uniquely or has the unchecked power to do, which just is not how things work. So there will be no guardrails if Kamala wins, but for Trump, the system is designed to make sure that even a guy who's a maniac like him can't completely F up the country.
And the question I have is, what evidence do we have that he would attempt to stick around for, say, a 3rd term? Is that like a real worry that people have? When people say that he's going to overrun the constitutional barriers, he may have attempted to do that, and then he was checked at every point. Whereas I think that actually the system is less built to stop, I would say, the sort of fine-grained excesses of the Democratic Party that is intent on actually changing many of the systems and changing the status of normalcy. So, for example, Kamala Harris has vowed to get rid of the filibuster. If you get rid of the filibuster, that means that you can presumably add 2...
Kamala Harris can't get rid of the filibuster, Ben. I mean, like, there you go, right there. Well, the system and the guardrails, they can keep Donald Trump in check, but they won't keep the Democrats in check because what they do is more fine-grained. And then he brings up an example of something that the president can't even do. So going back to the thing he said at the beginning there, the what evidence do we have that Trump will run for a 3rd term? The fact that he flirted with it at an NRA convention. Now, I don't know if Donald Trump he just says things for the sake of saying things a lot of the time. So I don't know how seriously to take it, but we have evidence of it. Now, he can't get an amendment passed because he would need 3/4 of the states to ratify that amendment. But like, all he has to do, and this is something he has done, if Donald Trump wins, like, put a pin on this because I bet this does happen. If Donald Trump wins and 4 years from now, what he's going to do, or like in January or whatever, all he's going to do is sit there and be like, well, I don't trust that they did the last election correctly. And I bet if it was a Republican who won 4 years from now, he would still do that. Definitely if a Democrat did it. But he would just say that they didn't do the election correctly. So until they fix the election or until we get the real results, then I'm still the president because we didn't even have an election. I promise that he will do that. And one of the reasons that you should take this seriously is because we know for a fact that he has burned basically every bridge. Everybody that used to work for him says he's a criminal, a fascist, and just a horrible person. So the only option that Donald Trump now has is to appoint people who are mentally ill or who are extreme loyalists that worship him. I don't know if you remember, but Mike Pompeo, for example, after the election was over last time, but before the election was ratified, even before January 6th, they asked Mike Pompeo, how are you preparing to transition to the next term? And Pompeo just said, we are preparing for a swift transition to a second Donald Trump term. And then he goes on and says, like, you guys in the media, you all know what happened. You can all see what's going on. Even if it doesn't work, the fact that he'll try it is still incredibly dangerous because it erodes trust in like the very system that makes our country work. Election trust is already way down. We got psychopathic Republicans burning ballot boxes. It's already really bad. Now I'm going to let Sam talk for a little while here, and then Ben has a short response. Despite the fact that Sam Harris, it seems like half the time is going, he still is so clear and direct and concise with his words.
But I want to come back to something you said to Ben. All of his words at this point on this topic could be used against him, right? And this change of heart, I think, is worth examining because I think we lose sight of just how not normal Trump is as a candidate. I think, Ben, if I had told you 10 years ago that you would one day support a presidential candidate who bragged about owning a teen beauty pageant so that he could barge into the dressing room and ogle naked underage girls, right? I don't think you would believe me, right? If I told you that you would support a candidate who, as president, had been denounced by almost every four-star general who worked under him as a dangerous moron, right? I don't think you would believe me. Or a president who had inspired an assault on our Capitol, directly inspired it. I mean, as much as you want to parse what he might have said in that initial speech, there's no question he called everyone to D.C. and inspired what amounted to be a riot on the Capitol. And he inspired this. I mean, we had people wearing Camp Auschwitz T-shirts and flying a Confederate flag, smearing shit on the walls that Abraham Lincoln built, right? That's what happened on January 6th. And if I told you that you would support this guy and still support him, a guy who has honored these people, right, who stood by as they were calling for the hanging of his vice president, he just stood by tweeting narcissistic bullshit, and he would later record a song with some of the worst offenders, right? There's 20 of them in prison singing on jailhouse telephones. He recorded his own track on this song, and he plays it at his rallies, right? If I told you would support such a person, you, Ben, right, you with your commitment to morality, right, and religious principles and public probity and ethics, I don't think you would believe me. But that's where we are, right? That's how fully Trump has distorted our politics.
So,
okay, there's no coming back from that, but here's Ben's attempt.
Again, I think that the same could be true in reverse. If I had told you, Sam Harris, a few years ago that you'd be supporting a candidate who says that men can be women, for example, or a candidate who has openly campaigned with, say, Mark Ruffalo, who has compared Israel to the Nazi state, or that you would be supporting a candidate whose first action in office, apparently, according to the New York Times about 3 days ago, was to examine intelligence reports for gendered language with regard to America's foreign adversaries who are female, you'd be surprised too. I guess all this is to...
So they literally can't talk about anything without being like, yeah, but transgender stuff, right? This is why this video is called The King of False Equivalency. Take all of the stuff that Sam said, and then the rebuttal is, yeah, but gendered language, the idea of people being trans, and then guilt by association because of Mark Ruffalo. So Ben doesn't like Mark Ruffalo because of what he said about Israel. But who was it that Trump had over at Mar-a-Lago for dinner? The analogy I've been using for years is the choice between Trump and blank, because I'm eternally dissatisfied with the alternative choice as well, is like eating shit or drinking piss. It's not even remotely close which one is worse. Now, I don't want to drink piss, but there's no world where I'm going to eat shit. In fact, drinking piss actually could help save your life if you had no other choice. but eating shit won't. This analogy it keeps getting better. Now, obviously a Trump supporter doesn't view their choice as the shit, but they pretend that it isn't piss either. They just say, oh yeah, he says stuff I don't agree with. And then they have total amnesia for child separation, tax cuts for billionaires, making money off of foreign countries with hotels and golf courses, $2 billion being taken, or being received, I should say, from Saudi Arabia, January 6th. And a host of things that I can't even remember. For every single thing that Ben Shapiro says, there is something vastly worse that Donald Trump has said. If I was going to put my conspiracy hat on, Ben is smart enough to know that he's completely full of shit. And literally their entire enterprise just exists because, hey, we make millions of dollars a year. So if Trump gets in, those tax cuts mostly benefit us. So it's literally just a business plan. A lot of people have said that about Donald Trump too. He only went in there to enrich himself. Now, I think that that's about half true. All right, what's next?
Is you obviously believe that Donald Trump is not just a threat to the presidency, he's a threat to the republic, a grave and abiding threat to the very future of the republic, which means what means would be moral to stop him? So, to offer a couple of examples, there have been a couple of assassination attempts on President Trump. Let's assume that Trump wins the election. Would assassination, if we are that afraid that he is going to be Hitlerian, then be an appropriate response? Or, less provocatively, would it be an appropriate response for Kamala Harris, who would be the presiding officer in the Senate, she's the vice president of the United States, to refuse to certify the election if Donald Trump were to win? Because obviously, if he's this grave and abiding a threat, so outside the norm of our politics, so far outside the possibility of a real normal politics that it can't be fixed, would she be right to do that, for example?
So, according to the Supreme Court, yes. This was literally argued. Trump's lawyer said that it would count as an official act if Trump ordered an assassination.
Because the left has decided, along with the media and the Democrats, but I repeat myself, to lie about the Supreme Court decision in order to revive the flagging hopes and dead body of Joe Biden. There is the idea that the president is, in fact, criminally immune from certain activities that a normal person would not be. So, for example, if I authorized somebody to go kill somebody abroad, I'd be criminally liable for that. If I'm president of the United States and as commander-in-chief, I authorize SEAL Team 6 to take out Osama bin Laden, I'm not going to be criminally liable for that.
Also, if you ordered them to take out your political opponent. So apparently, Ben Shapiro has literally no problem with the thing he said. Well, you wouldn't suggest that we should do this, should you? Well, here he is going over that very idea.
Straight from the asylum crap. Here she goes. Orders the Navy's SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival? Immune.
Yes, that was the ruling. This guy, Will Chamberlain, he's actually honest about it. That is exactly what that means. The only way a president could be found criminally responsible is if they get impeached in the Senate.
The president ordering them to do something blatantly illegal, like murder his political opponent? Prosecution of that crime would certainly overcome any presumptive immunity the president has in ordering his political rival to be.
It's not illegal if it's an official act. The whole point of this is the president can do stuff that other people cannot, and if he just labels it an official act, then there's nothing wrong with it. Well, it's wrong, but it's not illegal, and he can't be tried for it. This is what Trump's lawyer, who sounded like Steve-O, said. The answer he gave was qualified yes. So, Ben, you disagree with the very lawyer that represented Donald Trump. And here's the other piece of hypocrisy that I absolutely cannot stand it from the right. He talked about, Thomas Crooks, the guy that shot at Trump and the other. My entire adult life, I have listened to the people on the right be horny for civil war. They're the ones that go around saying, one side doesn't know which bathroom to use, and we have all the guns. Bring it on. They're the ones that flirt with the idea of, if we went through the constitutionally legal process of amending the Constitution and getting a more clear sense of what the Second Amendment means or banning certain guns, they say, come and take them, I dare you. Or they just flat out say the reason we have it is to deal with tyrannical governments. That is direct advocation for killing people in the government. And you know who enforces the laws too? Cops. These people they have cop killer ideologies. I mean, that one guy at a Charlie Kirk rally asked him, he said, so when do we get to break out the guns on these guys? They keep stealing elections. I find it really cute that these guys go around and all they do is talk about this is why we have the Second Amendment. They threaten the idea of using guns against our own government. But then at the same time, it seems to them completely incomprehensible that anybody actually could be a tyrant. I think what happened to Donald Trump is completely wrong. But if that person was convinced that they were a tyrant, then aren't they exercising their God-given Second Amendment right? People on the right act like the left is on their way to having that justification brought to them very quickly. Again, they're not saying it out loud, but they're openly calling for assassinating people in the government, and the police enforce those laws. So instead of back the blue, law and order, they're just advocating for being cop killers. Their base is too stupid to know that that's what they're talking about, but that's 100% what they're talking about.
But right now on the campaign trail, when Donald Trump is asked, and he was on Joe Rogan a few days ago, about the 2020 election, he still claims that he won the election. What do you make of that?
I mean, I obviously disagree with him. I don't think that he won the 2020 election. Also, this is part and parcel. I wish it weren't. But it is part and parcel of a reactionary divide that has plagued our politics since before Donald Trump, frankly. I mean, when Donald Trump won the election in 2016, we then spent 3.5 years of people claiming that Donald Trump was a Russian plant and had been bootstrapped into office by the Russians manipulating Facebook. This sort of election denialism is not. It is ugly. It is bad on both sides. It is. I won't even say that what Democrats
on both sides.
On both sides. Again, so remember the premise of the video is the king of false equivalency. Nobody ever claimed that Donald Trump didn't actually win the election in 2016. Nobody ever claimed that. Clinton saying he was, illegitimately elected, that's like saying so-and-so is the illegitimate king. They're still the king. You just disagree with like how it happened, I guess. And again, the false equivalency. We know for a fact that social media troll farms exist. Now, did they have any real impact? I really doubt it. Let's contrast that to millions of Trump supporters who think he won and he didn't. Trump won't let it go. She conceded the election. Not a single thing the right and Trump and his legal experts argued for was real, apart from like that the states made changes to how people could vote because there was a national emergency at the time. One of these sides lives in a parallel freaking universe and the other doesn't. And then he goes on to say this.
It's not true. I mean, if Donald Trump wins this election, I promise you will see election denialism on the left that is incredibly similar to what you've seen from Donald Trump.
Incredibly similar. So what Ben said is 1% true, which is a record for Ben. And it's 1% true because Trump supporters are, and have been for years, standing outside voter registration places and voting locations with guns. They steal election signs or campaign signs from people's yards by the hundreds, by the thousands. They're burning ballot boxes, and the Republican Party has been making it more difficult for people to vote since 2020 under the guise of election integrity.
Donald Trump has this is my original claim, Sam, is that Donald Trump is very obvious in his excesses. Democrats and the Democratic Party and Kamala Harris are much more subtle in their excesses, but those excesses are no less dangerous for being more subtle. In fact, in some ways, I think they are more dangerous for being more subtle.
Ben, you can't use a phrase like no less dangerous.
That's just so incredibly stupid. So this is what Ben is selling you. The fact that the rhetoric from Democrats is objectively not as deranged makes it more dangerous. What a fucking idiot. What are you doing? There's just one more part of this that I want to go over.
Okay, a few points. One, the demonization of a vast swath of the American public has been happening as long as 2008, when Barack Obama was saying off record to donors that there was an entire cadre of bitter clingers who cling to God, guns, religion
It's unwise.
So he's been doing this for years, and it's so pathetic. The contrast is Donald Trump talking about that there is an enemy from within, saying stuff like, when the looting starts, the shooting starts. He does specifically go after his opponent, whoever it happens to be at the time, but he spends at least equal time, if not more time, just simply labeling the the opposite side, the radical left, the Marxist, fascist, communist, radical left, demonizing the other side all the time. And again, the false equivalency we have is Ben saying, well, this all started back in 2008 when Obama was caught on a hot mic saying, well, people cling to Bible and the guns. Yeah, that's an actual fact, Ben. He used to say this thing. I haven't heard him say it in a long time. I don't listen to Ben Shapiro either, so maybe he still says it. But the whole political, when Donald Trump first got on the scene, he said all these horrible things about his opponents and whatever. Ben was like, well, that all started when they said that Mitt Romney has binders full of women. As if I slapped you and then you murdered my entire family and then you go, well, you started it. We'll do one more example of the absolute blatant hypocrisy and false equivalency.
If you don't want to be called Nazis, stop doing it.
You're called an
You've
been called an anti-Semite more than anyone else's table.
Yeah.
People would sit there and, no, by me. I never called you an anti-Semite. I mean, I'm not sitting here saying
I'm a supporter of the Palestinians, so I'm used to it.
Yeah, I hope your beeper doesn't go off.
Palestine is not Hezbollah. Hezbollah is in a completely different country. Obviously, just like with Donald Trump's rhetoric, Ben's going to condemn it and say that it was wrong and saying that this kind of inflammatory rhetoric doesn't belong in our in the political theater, right? That's what he's going to do, right?
Mehdi Hasan is shocked. How dare you? How dare you suggest that I'm a member of a terrorist group? How dare you? Okay, that's a joke. Whereas what Mehdi Hasan is saying about Ryan Gerdowski
I don't think it was necessarily a joke.
is not a joke. He calls him a Nazi. Mehdi Hasan,
he didn't call him a Nazi. He said if you don't want to be compared to them, stop, using the same kind of rhetoric. So there you go. I mean, a lying little weasel is a lying little weasel. What do you expect?